Hello, Darklings! Today I wanted to break away from what I've been talking about a lot lately, and that would be moving into art, specifically modern art, and the pros and cons of it. Now, I know when I was growing up and I was studying modern art, I kind of thought, wow, this is kind of dumb. Like, what is the point? None of this looks like the thing you're trying to draw, and it all seemed very silly and unapproachable to me. But one of the things that I have noticed with modern art, or 20th century art, I should say, is one of the reasons why I didn't like it is I didn't understand the historical context of what was going on when it was painted, when it was made. Growing up, I liked the traditional ideas. I liked realism, naturalism, the truthful depiction of things, making things look like the object it's supposed to be portraying. Very beautiful, articulate things, even going, Renaissance, Greek sculptures, all of that I always thought was very beautiful. And when you had Courbet, Millet, Goya, and you have all these painters in the 19th century that are doing beautiful paintings that look as though they are just everyday scenes, and they look like they're taken from life, because they probably are. I always loved those. But then, I took a lot of art history classes. I've been in art school for long enough, and when I got a little bit more of the history behind what was happening with each movement within the 20th century, I had a better understanding of the pieces and could appreciate them a little bit more. Now, typically, when people think Picasso, they think, oh, he's the guy that couldn't draw faces. And, I mean, if you've seen his early stuff, he could draw very, very well. He was classically trained. And the idea of cubism, for which he was a master, what he was attempting to do was trying to see multiple planes within the same plane. He was trying to make a four-dimensional object into a one-dimensional object on his canvas. And it was a very interesting concept, and it just abstracted so far that it became nothing. But, some of his pieces and some of his abstractions are really beautiful, such as, the three Venuses, which I can never remember the name of, and Guernica, that gigantic painting about that massacre that's really just stunning. And I appreciate the childlike wonder in his stuff, and he's not a favorite artist of mine, but I do respect him immensely because his stuff really is quite important and groundbreaking. There are other movements, the Dada movement, started in 1916 in Zurich, and it's basically a response to the nationalism that happened in Germany around the time after World War I was finished and momentum was starting to build for World War II. And they were trying to fight that terrifying sense of everything's going to come crashing down on their heads and making everything as ridiculous and unintentional as possible. It's a series based on random acts and random noises, paintings. It's trying to be eclectic. It's trying to be weird. And there's something about that suits the time, and it's a very particular type of rebellion that I appreciate. And then there are other movements which I like, such as the Expressionist movement, primarily in Germany in the early 20th century. I mean, there are artists like Edvard Munch, who I don't like. Everybody knows The Scream. Actually, that image has been parodied so many times. I don't like him because he's kind of misogynistic and a total mama's boy asshole. But details. But I still love the German Expressionism concept because they were deciding to throw out traditional conventions and they were painting their emotions or what they were emoting about something, not just what they were seeing. And they made their paint reflect that as well as their colors. Fauvism, which I don't like, is a little different. It's trying to capture this childlike type of sense of wonder, but it's too bright and colorful. And even though I understand why I did it, it was a sort of you grow up to learn to be a child again thing, I still just can't look at it in the slightest. But it all has to do with abstraction and using color to emote something. Then you have something such as minimalism, which seems stupid, and you see pictures on the internet or you see pictures on a slide in a history class, you think, oh, I could do that. It's a box. But pieces like that usually are more impactful when you see them in person, in galleries. You get this sense of awe. And I know there is this painter who had a white canvas and painted a white box on it with another slightly smaller white box in it. And, on a slide, that looks very, very dumb. But you see it in person, you see the brush strokes, and you can see the slight color shifts within the fucking white, and suddenly it's something that's intense, almost, I guess some people would even go with spiritual. And when it came out, that was in the 1940s, which there's been a Second World War. Everybody's a little devastated. And when you think about the historical context, the way that people were changing their thoughts, the way that art changed with it kind of makes more sense. But you need to know what was going on in order to get some of the pieces. You need to have some context, because if you're just looking at it, you're kind of not getting anything. And you also have very ridiculous movements like Futurism, which I've always thought was really, really dumb. And they came up with a manifesto, which you can read online, which is actually funny because it's so stupid. But at one point, Marcel Duchamp, who is a tricksy asshole, which is why I'm so amused by him, did a very famous painting, Nude Descending a Staircase, which followed all the Futurists' rules very, very exactly, except he painted a nude woman. And he was just really sneaky because he did Futurism better than the Futurists, and he still broke their biggest rule. And he's just full of sass. That, and he also took a urinal, turned on his side, and wrote on it, and then sold it for $500,000 because he's a dick. And I think that's hilarious. So, and then, you get other artists such as Jackson Pollock in the 1950s, and you just look at it and you're like, wow, those are scribbles. But you see it in person. You see the depth of the layers of paint. You see crushed cigarette butts and bits of pencil erasers and shavings in there. And you're like, this is an in-depth piece, and it took labor to do, and there is a type of emotion in it. And then you start getting into the pop art movement, and then you get Andy Warhol, who I'm a giant fan of. The more I've learned about him, the cooler I realize he is, because in my history classes in high school, no coverage of Warhol. You saw that Marilyn Monroe painting, you saw the soup cans, but you didn't really see anything else. I didn't really even see the Liv Taylor paintings until years later, and I wasn't even really aware of his later work and his collaboration friendship with Jean-Michel Basquiat until college. And there are these artists that you don't really talk about because the 20th century to history classes, certainly in high school, is just entirely unimportant when it comes to the art movements. 20th century history, yes, it's very groundbreaking. We went through a lot of fucking wars and a lot of technological advancements, and it's more immediate because most of the people that were in that generation are even still around. And sometimes the art is kind of neglected because unless you know what was going on, if you knew what they were responding to, you wouldn't understand. Just for consideration. Till next time, Darklings.